And thanks everyone else for coming on this hot, hot weekend. Gosh, you know what we should pray for? We should give thanks for air conditioners. Oh boy, when I walked in here, I just thought, yes. You know, you do that sort of movement where your shirt is sticking to your back and you go into a shop and you go, that's how I felt when I came in here. Sunshine makes people happy, which is good, because there's a lot of problems in this world, but somehow we try and keep smiling. You know, Hong Kong always makes me laugh. This week they had the International Food and Drink Fair in Hong Kong. Thousands of people flew in for it. And, you know, as a reporter, I have to cover all these things. And you know who the head guy was? It's a guy called Mr. Duck, at the head of the food fair, which I thought was rather cool. I also encountered a charity this week, a Christian charity called Food for the Poor. And not joking, the name of the boss is Mr. Mahfood. Mahfood is apparently a Middle Eastern name, but Mr. Mahfood runs the Food for the Poor Christian charity. Also, that's not all. One of the social justice workers I encountered, his family name is Guy, G-U-I, and guess what his parents gave him as a first name? Christian. So his name is Christian Guy, and he's a social worker, right? I mean, like, you know, it suits him. But don't know what happens if he changes religion. It'll be a bit tricky, won't it? Today we've been doing a series based on a best-selling book, and today's chapter is intentional faith development. And the pastor, who's busy having a baby, as you know, came to me a few weeks ago and said, "I'm a bit busy on the 18th weekend, having a baby. Will you preach?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "Yeah." And the subject is intentional faith development. Do you know what that means? And I said, it'll be fine. Now, when I agree with something, I say, sure, yes. If I have no idea what they're talking about, I say, it'll be fine. Because it means, you know, I've got time to look it up. Okay, so I looked up, so I asked you guys, remember last week? I asked you guys, what does intentional faith development mean? And none of you knew, right? None of you had any idea what intentional faith development means, which gave me a lot of comfort, because it's, you know, it's a bit of jargon, let's face it. Churches have as much jargon as engineers and architects and lawyers. So I read the book, no alternative, and intentional faith development actually means something very simple. It means growth. That's all it means, growth. Growth is something we all know about. It reminded me once of doing a course with a group of young people, and at the end, I asked them, I asked one in particular, do you feel, have you grown? And he said, yeah, I used to be like 12 inches. Now I'm like a human. And I just thought, yeah, you are like a human. But of course, we're talking about spiritual growth as opposed to physical growth. Now, what does that mean? What does spiritual growth mean? I think the best way to think about it is, you know, sometimes you meet somebody and you think, okay, I want to be like them. And there's always, we all do that. There's a few instances and something happens, you think, okay, I want to be like that person. And just digging up some from my own memory, we used to have a neighbor, big housing estate like most of us living in Hong Kong, and the school bus stopped outside every day, and all the parents would come with the kids and shove them on the bus. And one of my neighbors was a woman called Cindy Gaskin. And her kids went to the school bus, same bus as us, and she would come along, and she would say hello to everybody by name, right? Nothing that unusual. But not only did she know everybody's names, she knew all the names of all the helpers. She'd memorized all the helpers' names, including the Filipino ones and the Indonesian ones that were hard to pronounce. She knew them all. And I just thought, that's the first time I've ever seen that. Someone knows all her neighbours' names and all the helpers' names. I just thought, that's really strange, because if you think about it, you know, this is supposed to be a class-free society. So how come this is so rare? Cindy really impressed me. She was new to Hong Kong, and she didn't know that Hong Kong had strict class divisions. So she just befriended all the helpers and treated them exactly the same as she treated her neighbours. And that's what we should all be doing, really, isn't it? She even knew the names of the dogs. Cindy Gaskin. Okay, that's an example of somebody of spiritual growth, and you think, okay, I need to grow in spirit to be like that. I mean, Pastor Ebson is another good example. Like, I love the way Pastor Ebson prays, because like prayer is, sometimes it just feels like words, right? And sometimes it feels like there's a connection. And when Pastor Ebson prays, you kind of think, okay, he's really having a conversation here. I better tune in, I better listen, I better get into this conversation. And that's how it should be. And some Christians are like that. They really, you feel they're really touching that divine spirit. Not just Pastor Ebson, some of the people here. I mean, Sandra is a great prayer. I mean, there's quite a few people here who are actually really good at making that connection. We can learn from them. And of course, ultimately Jesus, we want to be like Jesus, right? Do you remember about 20 years ago, some of you are too young, people wore bracelets which said, what would Jesus do? And people laughed and said, that's a kind of silly idea. But you know what happened? The crime rate went down. The rate of teenage pregnancies went down. Those little bracelets that were laughed at actually changed society. It's amazing. Just look at the statistics. So all we need, basically, we go around doing bad stuff, and then we catch sight of the little bracelet, and we think, whoa, I shouldn't be robbing this bank. And we decide not to rob the bank. You know, so I'm a great one for statistics. Some of you know I write science books, so I have to deal with a lot of data. So that's our spiritual growth. We need to be like Jesus, to be like the Christians we know, because Jesus doesn't live next door to you, but he may live next door to you in human form, and people will see Jesus in you too. One of the great signs of spiritual growth, I think, is patience. And people like Cindy Gaskin, like Pastor Ebson, have more patience than most of us. Yesterday, I was trying to log on to a website, and this thing came up, prove you're not a robot. I hate those things. Prove you're not a robot. And this time, I don't know, it happened too many times, and I just typed in, look who's asking! You are a robot! You're asking me if I'm a robot! And the thing didn't expect that answer, and it failed me, basically. So there's a robot telling me, oh, you're not human, you're just a robot. You're the robot, not me! I mean, I go really mad. I said, okay, my patience needs to grow. Patience is very much a sign of spiritual growth. Jesus' brother, whose name was James, wrote a letter. And he wrote, brethren, count it joy when you fall into trials. The testing of your faith produces patience. So he knew all those years ago that patience is really the sign of spiritual growth. Okay, so that's the principle we're talking about today. And I'm just going to give you 4 lessons, or 4 ways we can get into spiritual growth. Number 1 is to learn by listening. Learn by listening. Listening to who? Well, listening to yourself first, listening to your life, listening to the universe, listening to God. I think all of those things are part of the lesson. So here's a challenge. I want you to try this, right? Next time you're on public transport, in a bus, in a MTR, back of a taxi, don't reach for your phone, right? You know what happens. You sit in an MTR and your right hand just goes straight for that pocket to pull out your phone. Just resist. Okay, hold your hand with your other hand if need be. Do not go and reach for that phone. Instead, just be. Just be. And what will you find yourself doing? You'll be looking at the other passengers. Your mind will be wandering. Perhaps you'll read the little posters. And maybe you'll think. Maybe you'll ponder. I'll tell you what happens. I write science books, right? I'll tell you what happens if you do nothing for a while. If you don't look at a screen, if you don't read. What happens is your brain goes into a state we call theta waves. Theta waves. It's a different condition. It's what happens when you meditate for a long time. It's what happens if you pray for a long time. You go into this state of theta waves. And that has been something that humans have done ever since we evolved. Theta waves are really important, those theta wave times. And you know what's happening today? We don't have any theta wave times. Because every time we stop moving, we get out that phone and we stare at it. And there are no theta wave times. What is that doing to your brain? Well, scientists are very seriously worried about this. They're very seriously worried about this. In Silicon Valley, none of the people who run Facebook or Google or Alphabet allow their children mobile phones because they know the theta waves are being destroyed. And yet we do it ourselves. We do it ourselves. What happens if you just get away from screens? What happens, of course, is that you start to tune into something else. You hear the music of your own life. You know, your life has a rhythm, just like a song. Your life has happy chords and sad chords, just like music does. And that's what you tune into once you've silenced Facebook and Instagram and the BBC News and all those things that want to crowd into your mind. When I was a kid, like most kids, I hated exams. I hated exams. Because you know what happens, you do your revision or do a bit of revision, and then when the exam starts, your mind goes blank. You think, oh no! Just everything goes. And I had a Christian friend who said, you should pray before every exam. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try this. And so I decided I would pray for 5 minutes before every exam. So the big exams came round. We all went into the little hall. No mobile phones, so we couldn't cheat. We all sat down, and the invigilator at the front said, begin. Turn your paper over. And you know what I did? I looked at my watch, said, okay, 5 minutes, I'm going to pray. So I just sat there. After 1 minute, the invigilator ran from the front to my desk and said, what's wrong? What's wrong? I said, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. You can begin now. I said, okay, I'll begin soon. He went back. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. All the teachers was pointing. And I was like in big trouble. Eventually, after my 5 minutes was up, I turned the paper over and started writing. So I did this for every exam. And you know what? I did fine. I had much less memory problems. Years later, I was reading New Scientist, and there's this massive study, and they said, your mind blanks when you go into a panic, such as the beginning of an exam. The best thing you could do is spend 5 minutes sitting calmly and getting rid of the panic, then begin the exam. And I had all this evidence to show that that was the way to do exams. So I thought, okay, there's something in this, to get away from the noise of life and tune into the universe. Now, when we're in that state, of course, then we can connect to the universe, to God. We can tune in. Again, I'm not, prayer. I have a lot of friends who are atheists or who are just like in-betweenies, and they don't really believe in prayer. They just think, okay, it makes you feel good, do it, or they think it's just a waste of time. Fine, I don't argue with them. But what do scientists say what happens when you pray? Well, we can't ask Stephen Hawking because he's dead, but we can ask his partner, the guy who shared the science prize with him, a guy called Roger Penrose. Roger Penrose, who many people think is smarter than Stephen Hawking's. He said, it's really interesting what happens in consciousness because your physical body and everything you touch is in this physical reality, but your consciousness is not. Your consciousness is in the quantum dimension. There are little tiny objects in your brain cells, he calls them microtubules, which connect your consciousness to the quantum dimension. The quantum dimension has no rules of time, no rules of space. It's just different. And it's very interesting to read Penrose and then think about things like prayer. Because Penrose believes that your consciousness affects reality. Now that isn't a particularly startling thing to say. People have said that since the beginning of time. Your consciousness makes reality, but now the quantum physicists are saying the same thing. One famous British quantum physicist said, we now know the universe is not a giant machine. It's a giant thought. And all consciousnesses are part of that great consciousness. Now, this is not a religious person talking. This is a famous quantum physicist. Okay, so prayer, consciousness, listening to that, getting into the theta wave state. These are important things, but we're not doing it. We're looking at our phones. So the first thing to do, turn off those phones, turn off the laptop. That's what we need to do. And you know, we flick open our Bibles and we come to Psalm 46. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." You need to be still to know that God is God. You need to be still to tune in to the universe. And that stillness is what's missing from modern life. When we had our third child, we bought a car. We thought we were against cars, really, but we bought one because keeping hold of 3 small children is really difficult. And we got in there, and you know, I work for the media, but I hate the media. So we had a music machine in front of the car, and I said, "Well, it's not functioning." And you know, wasn't functioning because it wasn't turned on, right? So they said, "Oh." So I said, "So on car journeys, we'll have to talk and sing and entertain each other, have discussions." And so we did. And on long car journeys, we just sang and sang. And people would say, "How come your kids know the lyrics of every song?" And it's because we spent hours every week singing. Every time we were driving somewhere, we'd just sing because the music machine didn't work. After a year, one of the kids touched the on button and it sprang to life. "Daddy, I fixed the music machine!" And I said, "Oh my goodness, son, you're so clever." And from then on, we had Disney songs every trip, but they already knew all the words to all those Disney songs. So important to get away from the media. Reporters like me. Okay, that's number 1, learn by listening. Number 2, learn by reading. Learn by reading. That's how you expand your spiritual life. Now I'm going to do something I hate. I'm going to tell you the plot of a book I really like. Don't you hate it when people do that? But I'm going to make you suffer. Okay? It's a plot of a book. I really love this book. Okay, it's about this Middle Eastern guy, Eosha, his name was. He was born in a place called now I don't know about my Middle Eastern accent, Beit el-Kham. And Beit means bread in the Semitic languages. So his town was basically like Bakersville. It was called Bread Town, basically. It was a town where bread was baked for the region. And Yosha grew up in this town. Well, he didn't grow up in this town. His family moved quite a bit. But when he was an adult, he found he had a power of storytelling. He would go out and tell stories, and his stories would change people's lives. More and more people came to listen to this traveling storyteller. And what happened? The authorities decided he was causing too much trouble, and they decided they would kill him. His own people, his own religious leaders decided, he's causing too much trouble. Let's kill him. But he was safe because he had friends. He had Petros, Johannes. He had a group of friends who were protecting him as he hid and snuck out of the house, told stories to the people, and then hid back before the bad guys got him. But here's the twist. One of his friends was a double agent, ready to dob him in to the bad guys. Okay, so it's a pretty exciting story, right? Now, I'm not going to do a spoiler and tell you the ending, but after that story finished, I mentioned his friends, Petros. Well, Petros had a friend called Johannes Marcus, and when he was about 60, Petros said, we need to write it down, all this stuff that happened. And Marcus said, I'll do it. And Marcus wrote down Petros's memories. And the result was this amazing book. And people have said this book has changed the world more than any other book. And I think they're right. That book, where is that book? That book is in your pocket. It's called The Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Mark is different from all the others. It's clearly an eyewitness account of the events 2,000 years ago. In 1977, there was an actor in UK who was having a break. He'd done quite well, but between plays and films, actors have breaks. And he was having a break, and he had an idea. He would learn the Gospel of Mark and turn it into a one-man play. He would not change one word of it. Just do it as a one-man play. And so he did. It took him 16 months to memorize the whole book of the Gospel of Mark. And then he booked a theatre, and he told the managers, my play is just called The Gospel of Mark. And they said, okay, so you're going to dramatize it. He said, no, just going to read it. Just going to read the Gospel of Mark, the whole thing. Yep. And he did. Now, he was a wonderful actor. Alex McCowan was his name. And he got up on stage, and he recited the Gospel of Mark from beginning to end. Complete sellout. It sold out every night. And people left the theatre in tears. It transferred from his small theatre to the London theatres. Sold out every night. It transferred from London to New York. Sold out. What had he discovered? He discovered the magic of reading the Bible. And it's so strange because we spend all our lives, people telling us, read the Bible, read the Bible. And people, Christians, they give you little pamphlets saying, here is a reading plan. Read 7.5 verses a day, and you'll have read the whole Bible in a year. Well, you know what? Throw those plans away. Throw them away. Useless, useless. Just pick it up and read it. If you can read Harry Potter, if you can read Lord of the Rings, you can read the Bible. I mean, Lord of the Rings is probably longer than the Bible, right? If you can read that, I mean, the last Harry Potter book was how many pages long? I don't know, the audiobook version was like 25 hours just to listen to it. It was long. If you can read Harry Potter, you can read the Bible. So just start at page 1, finish at the end. If you're too lazy to do that, read the Gospel of Mark. Do you know how long it takes to read the Gospel of Mark from beginning to end? 1 hour. In fact, less than 1 hour. You could read it in one lunch break. Okay, so that's the second way of learning. Learn by reading. So learn by listening to yourself, to the universe, to God. Second, learn by reading. Third, learn by doing. Now, God wants us to do stuff. Say yes to life. Seize the day. Carpe diem. Do stuff. There was a famous band. There's a famous band that writers love because you have to be a professional writer with a big publisher to be a member of this band. And all the band members are famous writers. And they travel around the world. And wherever they go, they pick a local writer to temporarily join the band. So I heard they were coming to Asia. I was so excited. I thought, I'm a writer and I play instruments. Oh boy, pick me, pick me. So I get the call. Hello. The band's called The Remainders. The Remainders are coming to Asia. And we're looking for musicians, and somebody gave us your name. And I said, yes, I'm free. Well, the date is, I'm free. Okay, cancel anything to be on that, right? We're doing a concert in Shanghai. So I said, yes. And they said, only one problem. The only space is for a bass guitarist. Do you play the bass guitar? Like, I'd never touched a bass guitar in my life, right? So what did I say? It'll be fine. And a week later, I flew up to Shanghai and touched the bass guitar for the first time. Learned how to play it. Fortunately, it's like the easiest instrument. Like bass guitar is something we're nice to them, right? But it's so easy. And played my first concert. So just say yes to life. 1 Chronicles 28, David says to his son Solomon, be strong, be courageous, and just do it. You see, you thought Nike made up that phrase, just do it, but it's in the Bible. David says it to Solomon. At church, when we join a church, we're invited to do all sorts of really horrible things, like, for example, teach Sunday school. Teach Sunday school. I mean, some of you have volunteered for it. You know, the first time you do it, it's such a shock, isn't it? Because, like, some of the kids are so naughty, and you just really want to kill them. But we don't, of course. You can't kill people in church. It's like in the bylaws. But what happens? Of course, you learn how to do it. So throw yourself in. A famous writer called Harvey Mackay said, you know, life is too short to wake up in the morning with regrets. So love the people who treat you right. You know, forget about the ones who haven't. Believe that everything happens for a reason. If you get a chance, just take it. If it changes your life, let it. Nobody said life would be easy, but they did say it would be worth it. Okay, wise man there, wise man. Another person asked an interesting question. Are you going to die with dreams or with memories? Don't die with dreams, die with memories. Okay, just go out there and do it. So, number 3 is learn by doing. Number 4, learn by teaching. I had a friend a while ago who worked at the Canton Trade Fair. Anybody know what the Canton Trade Fair is? It's a meeting in Guangzhou, but it's actually the biggest, most important business meeting in the world. All the people from the West, from Africa, come to this meeting, and they choose which products will be made for the shops. Fashion, toys, everything over the next year. And this guy I knew who worked there, you know what he did? He went around all the other trade fairs. He just picked all the most interesting items, and he'd book a stall at the Canton Trade Fair, and he'd put all these items on his table. He hadn't made any of them, right? He just bought them, right? And then the international visitors would arrive, and they'd look, and they'd say, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. Oh, this one. Oh, this is amazing. Can you make me 10,000 of these? And he'd say, yes. And he'd say, do you know how to make 10,000 of these? I can't see how it's made. And he'd say, yes, fine, no problem. It'll be fine. And then as soon as he got the deal signed, he would start researching. How do I make these things? And of course he became very successful. He just said yes to everything. He was a yes man in the best possible way. I had a commission to write a science book on relativity and quantum physics. Tricky, 60 chapters. So I signed up with a local newspaper to do a weekly column on quantum physics and relativity. And so every week on Wednesday, they'd call me up. We need your column tomorrow, you've got 3 hours. And of course, with a weekly deadline, I got it written. With a newspaper, you can't just say, oh, I'll leave it for a day or two. You can't leave anything, you just got to do it. So jump in and teach and be the teacher. Learn by Learn by teaching. One of the people I know who knows most of the Bible study, knows many Bible verses, just worked in Sunday school a lot, and of course ended up learning all the verses by teaching the children. So, learn by listening, learn by reading, learn by doing, learn by teaching. Some of the best churches are the churches where, like this one, where people are just thrown into jobs, you know. You are leading the hymns. You are leading Sunday school. You are doing this job. You are doing that job. You're in charge of the camera. And by forcing people into jobs, they rise to the challenge. They rise to the challenge. The fifth and last one, learn by bonding. We learn by being in groups of friends who help us to learn. We learn from each other's wisdom. Writers, we go to writers' groups and we share manuscripts, right? Now, I did this for many years, and luckily I went up the ladder. I was quite successful, but I still forced myself to do it. You know why? Because somebody always makes a good comment. So I'd go to a writer. This is how it works, right? Writers group meets every week or every month, and you share manuscripts and stories, and you criticize each other's, right? So when it's my turn, you know, you go along and you sit down and say, okay, it's my turn. You know, so guys, I've sent you the story. What do you think? And people give you comments, and the comments are usually really dumb. I mean, they're really dumb from your point of view, right? Because you've written this masterpiece, and they're thinking, and they're tearing pieces off it, and they're abusing your ideas. But what do? You smile and you nod and say, "Oh, interesting comment. We'll take that on board." Right? That's what you do. That's how writers' groups work. And each person gives their own personal critique, and you sit there and nod. And yeah, I know there's another writer in the congregation here who's nodding away. You've been there, right? Yeah, right. So you're sitting there and you're nodding. And then what happens, and it always happens, is that the 11th person said something, and you're thinking, yeah. Just, I think the main character's sister should die in chapter 6. And you're thinking, yeah. Wait, the main character's sister should die in chapter 6. That would change everything. Yes, that's the idea I need. And they always give you one brilliant idea that just fixes the book, okay? Life is like that. We learn from each other. The more we interact with other people, the better things get. Even people who we're disrespecting can teach us something. Even people we think, I think you're stupid. Don't say that. Just listen, because everybody can teach us something. Okay, so Jesus had another brother called John, and he wrote, if we walk in the light, we'll have fellowship with one another. St. Paul in Romans said we need to be mutually encouraged by one another's faith. The writer of the letter called the Hebrews said, never give up on gatherings. We need them to encourage one another. So technically you can be spiritual by yourself in your house, but gathering together is important. It adds so much to our spirituality. Okay, that's enough of me talking. So I want to give you a challenge. I get into groups with people nearby, of whatever number you like. And here's my question to you. How would you grow your spirituality? What method would you use? Are you already using some method? Have you found a method that works really well for you that you can share with other people? How do you grow your own spirituality? Okay, that's the question, okay? Let's take a few minutes to do that. So you can just move your chairs around and get into little groups.